Greetings, everybody! Welcome once more to Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of Golarion, the setting for the Pathfinder role-playing game system? If you are, we're going to be heading back in time in Golarion to visit an ancient empire. Or we can probably just look at its ruins. The Shu Empire. One of the largest, but shortest-lived empires in Tian Xia history. So if you're prepared to dive back into both time and space to head to Golarion, for which your host and guide here, Tian Xia, Dracovin, open the gate for us, in time and space, through the universe, and please take my hand. I do require a little bit of a tip. Like to start ringing the bell and let me know what you think of all this, and if you've used any Shu Empire stuff in any of your games, or ancient ruins, or history. Golarion and the past awaits. Arrived! To Golarion once more. Alright, so the Shu Empire. Where can I learn about it? Unfortunately, the Shu Empire is one of those empires that we have a really good view of, and we're going to talk about it today. But there isn't a lot of large books about it. Things like Yixing and Lunghua, we have a lot bigger picture of, and even some of the other ones, like Balashma. But as for Shu, well, there's two books that talk about it a little bit. There's a small... I think this is on the wrong background. Don't mind me. Whoops! I'll check the other ones. Whoops. Don't mind the technical issues. Anyway, Tian Xia, Dragon Empire's Gazetteer. That one has a little bit of information about Shu, but very little. Most of what you're going to get really nowadays boils down to what's in the Tian Xia World Guide. It gives a pretty big view about Shu, and there's a couple other smaller places that talk about it. But really, these two books are going to give you your best view of it overall. And that's where most of my information comes from. Let's talk about it. Oh boy, let's talk about it. So, this is a Tian Xia world map. Why? Because, unfortunately, we don't really have a full map of where Shu Empire was. We have dates and information about it on its rise and meteoric fall. But the exact details of the map of it isn't something we know about. Something more akin to Lunghua, which has fallen in the last few hundred years, we have a better map about it. But for Shu, well, we can talk about it. It was one of the larger empires that took over a large section of Tian Xia. We know this. We know that it formed after the fall of Yixing in 5576 IC, or if you're going by AR, in 3076 AR. That it formed post there. It actually formed in the 25 years after there in 3101 AR slash 5601 IC. Basically, what was happening is after Lunghua fell, everything was falling into anarchy, and we get our figure here, Shu, who basically managed to bring civilization back, and its legacy has lasted. The Tian Shu ethnicity is named after the Shu Empire. Eventually, the empire would collapse in 5336 IC slash 4036 AR. But nonetheless, it had this lasting legacy in the entirety of the region. And we kind of have to focus on what this rise was, who was in charge of it, who formed it. Let's start with who formed it all and how did it come about. It was behind Zhao Dangshu. This was the first emperor of the Shu Empire, who was a bureaucrat before becoming this rebel leader and hero. He earned this throne by basically stopping a would-be tyrant from unsealing a greater evil. So yeah, rebellion, some great evil was going to be happened by a tyrant, defeated it, became empire. Years earlier, he relied on a trusted friend and advisor, the strategist Qiu Yan Heian. Now, and Shu was protected for greatness from the moment that they met. Basically, Heian was like, you're going to be great, I'm going to help you out. After Shu was crowned, Heian was discovered to be a sky dragon, who had been ordered by their family to basically aid humans. Basically, in the wars that would follow after the collapse of Yixing, the Sky Dragons basically wanted to intervene and make sure things were smoother. There wasn't as much chaos. These wars would be resolved. civilization would stabilize. Halen was supposed to leave. Shu got Halen to stay, at least for a while, because dragons were members of Tian Xia too, and should have the right to determine the continent's fate. So this unition and friendship between a human and a dragon, where the dragon was there because of the best of their family to begin with, and it became maybe something a little bit more earnest, is the settling of Shu. As interesting rise. But parts of this would lead eventually to its fall, and the fall from grace that would be meteoric, as I said, in this entire thing. And there's a sky dragon and maybe Hangman. Not really marked in the picture. Sure. But it's a sky dragon. Open-mindedness. This is one of the reasons Shu was popular. Unconventional and effective ways of handling problems is also known. Nagajor, well, that's another ancient empire, and there was tensions with it. But in order to ease those tensions, Shu moved his capital to Heiming. Yeah, and changed the directions of written text to overcome fears that writing was cursing others. Yeah, this is getting writing back into society and changing the way that it was written and the directions just to help people. There was a rigorous examination system to seek out the best advisors and policymakers, stable economic group, surplus wealth, cultural and artistic expression. Citizens proclaimed themselves Tian Xia of the Shu Empire. But Shu himself was not perfect. As he got older, ideals changed. Halen was still a young dragon. It would clash as they changed. Shu was aged. Halen was not the same way. Things like the establishment of Tang Man, which was a sovereign nation, was kind of a sour between the two of them. Halen believed that allowing these families, these magicians, their conceit was weakness. Basically, Shu thought that allowing them independence, rather than kind of controlling them, made them, instead of being just a subservient and perhaps a rebellious member of their empire, an ally. This might not be the final straw, but at some point, something happened, and Halen departed. Last time Halen was seen by humans was briefly outside the Imperial Palace on the day of Shu's funeral. Last time the dragon was seen. Shu himself lived for 222 years. Amassed a massive amount of wealth for his heirs. He did foster an incapacity to divorce problem solving for money, though. Unfortunately, he threw money at it a lot of times. His empire then lasted for 15 generations, and ultimately collapsed with accusations of witchcraft among the royal family. So yeah. The territory. Now this is, of course, a modern picture of Heiming. Heiming in Quain was the capital of Shu. The version of Heiming now is an entirely different city. Entirely. It has been ages past. But you do have to remember that. It's the legacy and the territory they control. From down to the borders with Nagajor to vastly much of the area of Longhua and beyond it. Imperial Longhua controlled much of the continent. Shu held more. Think about that. It was the largest of these ancient empires. But these years were short. 15 generations isn't a lot. In the course of time. The provinces had resources, though, to basically keep themselves going after the fall. A place like Goka was basically a metropolis on its own, and capital society was pretty safe. Granted, if you would listen to people in Goka and they would talk about their time in the Shu Empire, well, they would basically consider it mismanaged, nepotism, mismanagement. It was a century of internal conflict that, they got beyond. They got over it. Other legacies, of course, can be seen in plenty of places. The history links back to things like Hao Jin. Hao Jin, who died and was resurrected in a museum based on the old empire. And basically, thanks to a rare purple flower found in the Emperor's footprint, create this figure and all those kind of things. So the legacy of Shu lives on in other figures like Hao Jin, her resurrections, her rebirths, and the connections to the old Shu Empire in a lot of ways, not directly, but allowing these mythical figures to appear post-Shu. It's the sheer fact that, is there a huge legacy to the Shu Empire? No. Lasted a little over 100 years. I'm sorry. It lasted only about shy of millennium. Sorry, nearly 1,000 years. It basically almost lived 1,000 years. Which, again, sounds like a lot. But in the tens of thousands of year history of Tian Xia, not that long. Just an interesting little fact there with that one. And it being the shortest lived of the large empires in a lot of ways. But nonetheless, power, strength, and a legacy that does exist. That is ancient at this point in time, of course. That's Shu. And of course, I would love to know more about the Shu Empire. We may learn about it at some point in the future with other material. The amount we know on it is minimum. And we can talk about places, ruins of it, and various locations that are linked to it. From Goka to many of the nations that have history that deals back even as far as Shu. It's true. Wayne, Goka, all these places that I'm naming. Ming, dating back to this time period. These are all legacies of this empire. And this empire, which its collapse was probably not as traumatic as Yitzhak. I think that's the important part about Shu. When Yitzhak fell, it was dramatic. It was deadly. It was violent. It was a terrible time. When Shu fell, it wasn't as bad. The stability of Shu meant that when it fell and the empire broke apart, it was quiet. Safer. It was not the dangerous time that had been before. These territories just broke apart in their own regions. Big governments went away. And the wealth that had been distributed was enough to keep places alive. To weather the fall of an empire. I mean, we see some places that have repeats of that with the fall of Langwa. Other places that didn't weather it so well. But it's interesting to see that when Yitzhak fell, it was tumultuous. It was a terrible time. Yeah. The differences between the falls of these great empires is fascinating. And it's one of those reasons I think that Shu and talking about it is a great topic, even if we have only a small bit of information. Maybe we'll get more in the future, but if not, it's a stepping stone on Tian Xia history that's fascinating, it's worth talking about, and that's worth you learning about. It goes to show you the tenacity and the very deep history of Tian Xia. That'll be it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Please check out all my other stuff, whether it's live with me on Twitch or over on the YouTube side. All my tabletop stuff gets uploaded whether it's recorded over on Twitch or not, over onto the YouTube side. I do other stuff on gaming and stuff over on Twitch, and you can always join me in checking out, gaming, hanging out, stuff like that. But again, if you just want to see the tabletop stuff, YouTube will hand you, or you can do it live. I don't mind that either. My schedule is usually put up on my social medias. That's all the various places. Link below. Discord, the big one. Go with X, Twitter, Blue Sky. Those kind of places are also good to check out what's going on. My schedule is usually up then. And any updates to the daily schedule, the weekly schedule is usually pretty exact. Anyway, always check out my stuff. Remember to do that stuff I said at the beginning. Like, subscribe to the bell, and let me know what you think about Shu. If you've got any ideas for using it, any legacies on it, all that kind of stuff. I'm interested in what people think about Shu. It's a great, interesting place to talk. But anyway, until the next time, I bid all of you out there adieu and wonderful farewell.